I'm Russell Boyd, cinematographer. As a teenager, I had a real interest in photography. It became my hobby. We were living out of Geelong in Victoria, and my mum got on a train one day, went up to Melbourne, tried to find me a job because I wanted to be a press photographer. Thank God I didn't get a job. But she found a job for me at Cinesound in Melbourne, who were then an offshoot of Cinesound Sydney, and they, in those days, used to do theatrical newsreels, about 7 or 8 minutes each week. The cinema news was gradually being phased out, but Cinesound in Melbourne used to do some TV commercials as well. So I got a job helping paint sets, clean toilets, all that sort of stuff, and then became an assistant cameraman. And learned to love cameras and loved the idea of making film my profession. And fortunately, was that for all these years later, still is. So my early days at Cinesound were pretty informative. I got started from camera assistant and then got to shoot a few TV newsreels, and then left there, and commercials, and left there and went to Channel 7 in Melbourne as a news cameraman. In those days we did shoot black and white, mostly on an Arri 2B, 16mm film mode camera we had, but that was mainly used for little documentaries and stuff, I think. We also had, and it was in a box, we had a fabulous Mitchell camera, which was a visual effects camera. It had irises and all those sort of things. May even be one here, I don't know, I doubt it. But it had a nameplate on the box, C. DeMille, care of Cairo, Egypt. And that was the camera they used for the visual effects on Ben-Hur, the original Ben-Hur. Wow. And we used to pull it out to shoot titles on. I had my own Bolex camera in those days, and Channel 7 didn't have enough 16 Arris, so I shot a lot on my own Bolex camera. I was at Channel 7 shooting news for about 9 months. One of the last stories I shot was these two kids. They took off on this plane for a joyride and crashed. And when I got to the scene, the plane was still smouldering, and these two skeletons were, with the flesh all dripping off them, were sitting in the seat still. And I thought, this is not for me. I couldn't stand that. So then I came to Sydney to do documentaries. I went to Supreme Films. We did a lot of commercials there. Supreme would often put together 3 or 4 crews in a day, all doing different commercials. So that was a great training ground. Mike Thornhill and I shot a couple of films together that he wrote and directed, and I shot obviously, but ultimately he got a picture going called Between Wars, and he asked me to shoot it. So that was the first motion picture I shot. The Man from Hong Kong was my second feature film, and The Picnic at Hanging Rock was my third. So that's where it took off, obviously. Yeah, I did win a BAFTA for Picnic. First time I'd worked with Peter Weir too, which was great. He's terrific to work with. I've actually shot 6 films with Peter, starting with Picnic at Hanging Rock, The Last Wave, Year of Living Dangerously, Gallipoli, then Master Commander, and then The Way Back in Bulgaria, shot in Bulgaria. I did pick up one of those gold statues. I think it was in 2003 for Master and Commander. That was pretty much a high point. It was totally unexpected, and I don't think we go out and shoot films thinking, wow, this could earn an Oscar. But it was a big film, and there I was. I got it. I mean, you know, Oscars go to cinematographers when there's an awful lot of other people make their work look good too, particularly in terms of visual effects, in terms of grading, you know, art, everybody. I mean, it's art direction. Films are collaborative, really. They're not. It's not like still photography where one person can go out and tell a story with that camera. Films are very collaborative in that there are all these departments have to come together, and if their work's all great, then they can be up for something in the awards department pretty well. The technology has changed incredibly since my very early days. I've seen the introduction of HMI lights, pretty much the introduction of zoom lenses, and now, of course, the whole digital revolution, which I actually love. It's been a major, major change of direction for us and the way we do our job. it's a total learning process. You do learn on the job. You learn as you go on, and hopefully, we've all sort of evolved along with the technical changes. Where we are now, I love it. I love what we can do in terms of visual effects, what we can do in our grade at the end with the DI, with the digital intermediate. So I'm very much in favour of the digital medium. I'm happy to move on from film because you don't have those sleepless nights worrying about whether you feel like it was 3 stops under and everything had gone black, in the shadow area. I think I probably became aware of the ACS as a society, and I've been a member for a long, long, long time. I think I joined when I was in Melbourne. I think it's always been, from where I stand, a great great way to exchange knowledge between cinematographers. If you can get them together, we don't often get together. So I think the ACS is very important in that regard. We can have meetings. We can, have more functions. I mean, the current ACS is a lot more active than it was when I first joined, for sure. And it's obviously due to the people who put a lot of hours, hard work into the various state branches and federal branch as well. One of the highlights is I've always found I love working with my crews. I love that family thing you get if you go away on location, and I often used to work with the same people quite frequently, so you became really good mates and very much like a family being away on location. That to me is a highlight for sure, the way that used to be. Highlights working with interesting directors, for sure. Peter Weir in particular, I guess, but lots of others as well. One of the highlights is I still like to get up and go to work in the morning. I don't work 5 or 6 days a week anymore. I just shoot TV commercials, and not all that many. But I love getting up and going to work. And it never bothered me in all those times I spent in Hollywood or even in Australia shooting movies. At 5 o'clock in the morning, I'll be up and ready to go, or whatever. But always looking forward to the daily grind, because it can be a grind, but that's what you're there for, really, to figure that stuff out. So my advice to young cinematographers is, reminds me of an old joke, and it's about the joke set in New York, and this visitor in New York walks up to a New York local and says, "How do you get to Carnegie Hall?" And the New York local says, "Practice, practice, practice." Because, as you know, Carnegie Hall is where they have the most amazing concerts in America, at New York. So that's my advice, is practice, practice, practice. Shoot as much as you possibly can, every day if you can. It's not always possible, but you do live and learn, It's you don't know it all on day one, that's for sure. And we all make mistakes. We've all made mistakes. So the practicing and the learning process, I think, is critical. And it's constant practice, really. Same with operating, same with lighting, same with all our different roles as cinematographers. I think we have to attack our jobs, or have to perform our jobs from both sides, the technical side and the storytelling and creative side. Sometimes I think the technical stuff gets in the way. I've got a reasonable technical knowledge, there's no question of that, but I don't certainly know it all. I don't suggest that up-and-coming cinematographers let the technical side carry them away from the real side, the creative or the aesthetic side, because they're the most important. That's the most important part of our job. The very first time I ever read a script for a movie, I always let my impressions sink in, because I was a big believer in letting the first instincts be your guiding light, rather than trying to work through, all sorts of different permeations of the way you might shoot a film. But also, it's got a lot to do with the director's wishes, and also production designer too. First time I've ever read a script, I can see images in my head of the way it should look in terms of lighting and maybe camera movement. So that's the way I work, basically. There's no such thing as an easy movie to shoot. I I think the hardest one for me to shoot was Master and Commander because it was so complex. And we were shooting on a tank in Mexico, and very, very ambitious project, even though there was a fair bit of money. That was a very, very hard, physically hard picture to shoot. And that would probably be my hardest, but as I say, there's no films easy to shoot. Gee, a lot of memories. Just that whole atmosphere of being a cinematographer, being able to tell a story and help make a film.